With the release of Chapter 1189, the Straw Hats are looking more cooked than ever. Luffy is getting turned into a pincushion. Zoro and Sanji's opponents both just got granted insane strength and then insane weapons on top of that. And of course, Scopper, the Mountain Eater Gaban, has stepped in to, kind of stop the bleeding and stall Emu for a bit, but I don't think he'll be enough. So today, we're going to run through 5 potential candidates I have to be the hero of Elbaph. Jumping right in at number 5, I actually have Monkey D. Luffy himself. I know what you're thinking, how could he be so low? He's the main character. If anybody's going to take out the big bad, it's got to be the MC. And you would be correct, especially with One Piece, Luffy is the go-to guy, but recently Luffy has been sort of hitting a wall. We've been building towards a point where, Luffy's been punching above his weight class and it's been working out for him. But if we're being honest, he's not beating Kaido without Gear 5. He's not getting out of Egghead without the Joy Boy Hockey Knot. So Luffy has been kind of getting bailed out in a sense, these last 2-3 arcs. And I know there are a lot of people that believe, the Gear 6 or the next transformation is coming. Even if I did subscribe to that, theory, which I don't, I think Gear 5 will be the final form that we see from Luffy. He states himself, this is my peak. But even if we did, it's not going to be this early. We just got Gear 5, like I said, 2-3 arcs ago. So it wouldn't really make much sense for Oda to bail him out once again with the next step of the transformation. It has been very clear, these last couple arcs that Luffy is just kind of willy-nilly with Gear 5. He doesn't actually know the full capabilities. He doesn't know his true devil fruit. So we got to hit a point where, Luffy's got to start figuring this out. With all that being said, though, I do still think that there is a possibility for Luffy to bounce back in this arc, like, to a degree. Maybe not a full transformation, but he did go out pretty quick versus Emu, which I would be fine with. But, we got to put him on there, right? He's the MC. He's still potentially in the conversation for, saving the day. Moving on to number 4, I actually have Luffy's dad, Monkey D. Dragon. And once again, I know what you're saying. What is this guy on about? All Dragon does is look east. He hasn't done shit for 20 plus years, whatever. I don't care. At some point, Dragon's got to step in. And, he's kind of another one of those characters. It's like an Usopp where, most of it is joking slander. And majority of the fan base does know this dude is being kept for a reason, hidden in the shadows for a reason, because he's just going to be that busted. Like, Oda can't whip out a, top tier of top tiers like this for any normal occasion. But this is no normal occasion. I'm going to bring in the panel that has led to infinite Dragon slander, but also gives us our best idea of, when we actually will see Dragon move and do something. And that is when the Holy Knights move, that's when we make our move. Dragon, it's been 30, 40 chapters now, buddy. I mean, we've had Holy Knights terrorizing Elbaph easily, 20, 30 chapters if you don't want to add in the flashbacks and all that. So it's time, homie. Now, we do know that when Emu took over Gunko, way back when, at the beginning of the arc or towards the beginning, that the Holy Land has been set ablaze. So there is, something going on there. Somebody has caused some ruckus and is actually, making an attempt to piss off the Celestial Dragons. And, we've had the whole starving situation. There's the food shortage of the revolutionaries sabotaging, the food shipments. So they're already starving. It's been set ablaze. So you could make the argument that this is already, Dragon and the Revs making their move and doing something directly on the Holy Land, which I don't think would be, a bad idea, especially if you know that Emu's not there anymore. It's kind of open season. You got the 5 elders and then the remaining Holy Knights that are there. The Celestial Dragons really can't fight. So, it's definitely gonna be a lot easier if you don't have the King of the World on site. But knowing what we've seen from Dragon, when he's actually doing something in the story, he cares about Luffy. He's very concerned for Luffy's well-being. And like he said to Kuma, a child is, a parent's biggest weakness. And we've gotten that, reiterated in the Elbaph arc as well, with these kids trying to get taken and, injured, some of them nearly killed. Scopper almost got killed for Colin. So this is coming back into play. I could 100% see Dragon, his son, is on the brink of death right now. There's no better time for you to show up and, have another Logtown situation where, he stops Smoker and stops Luffy from getting executed as well. Have another moment like that where he pulls up and then him and Luffy actually have a legitimate interaction together. Like, I could see a scenario where, Dragon should trust Sabo enough to lead a charge on Marie Joie, at least an opening attack. So maybe he has Sabo, take a small group with him, start putting some pressure on Marie Joie. We know the King of the World's not there. At least Dragon should know this information. And then, maybe he takes his own smaller team to go help out on Elbaph, because he knows that Luffy is not only going to be a very important piece in the final war, but also, like I said, that's his son. However, I have put this at number 4 because it is a unlikely scenario that Oda would actually, put Dragon on Elbaph as well. Definitely would be an insane moment, and, it does have its reasons behind it, but I don't think so. And number 3, I'm going to have, another person that is actually there on Elbaph right now, and that's Tony Chopper. Chopper has been getting a lot of screen time this arc, arguably the biggest ones being that he is the counter to Domi Reversi. One punch, one slap, one anything, and he can automatically flip them back. Also, with the most recent chapter, we see that Robin wants him to come to the library, which, the leading theory on that is that, he's going to talk to Biblo. We just saw him talking to Ragnir, so maybe Biblo needs a translator as well. And with all these questions and, mystery around Biblo in this arc, I could 100% see him having some vital information when it comes to things like, it could be as simple as, maybe some help for the weakness against the Holy Knights or Emu. Or, on a more Chopper level, it could be truth about his Devil Fruit, because that is another big theory in the community, is that Chopper's Devil Fruit is not just the human fruit. The leading one is potentially the Forest God, which would line up a lot. We need to start seeing these gods revealed in One Piece. Chopper has a lot of the aspects that line up with it. I won't get into it because, I'm not as experienced with that theory, but it is a theory that I've heard, and when explained right, I do really like it. And with Chopper being, one of the people in this arc who has actually been, harmed like the least, he might be the most healthy person out there, and he is kind of escaping towards the library, stepping away, while everybody else is going to be, trying to step up for Luffy and, try to stall Emu as best as they can. I think he could be one of the people that come out, at the end, and if he does have an awakening or something like that, it's definitely going to be, medicine related or healing related. So I think it would be a really cool scenario. If everybody else goes down, Chopper goes and learns about the truth of his Devil Fruit and comes out with an awakening that, kind of gets everybody maybe not like fully healed, but, all immediate wounds like cured for a little bit. Something like that would just be huge upscale for Chopper and much needed with kind of, how sidelined his character has been, post time skip. Now, it is a bit of a stretch to say, Chopper alone by himself would be the hero of Elbaph, which is why I've put it at number 3. But, also like I was saying, it's been a lot of Chopper in this arc and a lot of, big moments for him and big developments. So, eventually every member of the crew has to awaken their Devil Fruit. We gotta start knocking some of these out. This would make a lot of sense. I'm going to go ahead and give the silver medal to the future king of the giants, Hiruden. Yes, he pulled up last chapter. He's gotten the lore from Loki. He knows who Emu is, or at least knows that he was an opponent of Harold. So he's going to step in now and, give his 2 cents on the matter. We've already seen Loki go at it for about, 5 to 7 chapters now. A little bit more if you include, like, before Emu actually showed up. But with Emu, he's been going band for band. He's been showing out. So now it's time to show, a little bit of the less loved son, at least like screen time wise, to step up. He wants to be king of the giants. He wants all of his people to live together. This is his moment. He's got to defend his territory. I think that he'll end up being the king because Loki doesn't really want that. He doesn't want to be the king of Elbaph. He wants to be the king of the world. Hiruden is on the more small scale. He wants to be king of the giants, so he's got to grow into that spot. Even if it's not, beating Emu, he's got to make a stand for his country. Obviously, none of these characters, besides maybe Dragon, could step up to Emu one-on-one. So I don't think any of these characters will be doing this solo dolo. They might have a little bit of assistance. But, the main thing is they will be the prominent character that, leads the charge on, kind of the counterattack or, potentially the dispatching of Emu to send him back to Marie Joie. I think it would be really cool if we saw a, Loki and Hiruden, maybe like Hokaku sovereignty. Even though Loki seems to be out of this fight, he has been donutted twice, so we shouldn't see him again. But I just think, at some point we got to see it. But, hopefully this arc, that would be, a sick attack to kick Emu out of here. Now, the other person I could see Hiruden teaming up with will be the gold medalist, who I think is most likely to be the hero of Elbaph, God Usopp. That's right, I believe that the man who wishes to be a brave warrior of the sea who has been dreaming relentlessly to come to this island ever since he met a giant, this is his time, to step up and have a monumental moment for Elbaph, for its future, to keep it going. Otherwise, Emu is wiping this shit out. Now, when we're talking about how exactly Usopp does this, is it an attack? Is it, his words? Is he teaming up with somebody? I think all three are on the table. So the first one, is he doing an attack? If he does, I'll tell you right now that he is going to be picking up Ragnar. That is 100%, if he is going to make an attack on Emu, he's going to need that hammer. I know, Usopp is supposed to be the sniper, but, he's also got a hammer in the arsenal. It's been established multiple times in the story that that is like the secondary weapon for Usopp. When he needs that hand-to-hand combat, really that metal-to-hand combat, it is the hammer that he's going to be whipping out. So, Ragnar's right there on the battlefield, definitely on the table. All he needs is one word from Loki, give him the go-ahead. I believe Usopp could pick that up. Now, with the second option, maybe his words, he could give a speech to Hyrule, if he's down and, losing to Emu to kind of reverse the fight like he did with Luffy versus Lucci. Or, speaking of Luffy, he could be giving Luffy that speech too. And you might be saying, well, wouldn't that be Luffy becoming the hero of Elbaph at that point? Now, I would still give that dub to Usopp, just like I still give the dub to Usopp for Luffy versus Lucci, because Luffy would not have continued without Usopp. So just like then, it would be Usopp, willing someone forward to, do it for him, because, Usopp is still, it would be a crazy jump for him to all of a sudden be slapping on Emu when everybody else got taken out. But if he could motivate somebody, that would be a big win too. The last and most likely option I can see for Usopp is actually a team up. And who is he teaming up with other than my silver medal Hyrule? Yes, these two underappreciated, under-leveled characters are going to have to step up for, these higher tiers that get the spotlight a lot more. Like I said with Chopper, this is kind of the theme for this arc is, those Namis, Brooks, Usopps, Choppers, even Frankie, are going to be getting some more love to kind of level out the playing field. I think Oda knows we're going into the final arc. These characters are all going to need to be, around the same strength. Obviously, they're a Yonko crew, but, the power gaps are getting kind of wild at this point. Plus, we already had the whole Hyrule and Usopp moment in Dressrosa, God Usopp. And then, once he got to Elbaph, they were both stoked to see each other again. So that bond is just, being built more and more. I could definitely see, a combined attack from these two guys to, send Emu back, or, just an attack strong enough to make him send himself back, once he's hitting his time limit. But with that, those are my 5 most likely candidates for, the hero of Elbaph, who's going to come in to save the day. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Who do you have, showing up to save us? If anybody at all, there's a high chance that we just get cooked here and Emu goes back on time limit themselves, but that's a whole nother video. Until then, I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.